So this is the install video for the US Millworks license plate bracket. This is what they look like when they're fully assembled. This is the light kit here, and here's one installed. And one of the nice things about this kit is you can just spin it off like this. You can only do this on the Porsche sports cars, the Panamera, the Carrera, the Boxster, the Cayman. But if you go to a car wash, it's nice to just be able to quickly remove this, get the whole front of your car washed, and then spin the bracket on. Now on the other cars that we make it for, BMW, Volkswagen, Mini, etc., you can't spin it off, and that was a problem. So we came up with this solution here. It's a quick release, and these two parts in green are the parts of the quick release. It's an adapter. It works on any one of our kits, and the way it works is these two just slide together and it holds the plate on, and then there's some pins that hold it. I happen to have one on here, and as you can see, you just remove these two little cotter pins and you can lift the plate off. Now you can go wash your car, same deal, you can get everything done, and then when you're done with the car wash, just put your plate back on, put these two pins in place, and away you go. The other nice thing about the quick release is that you can still quickly remove the entire plate, and the way you do that is you just knock it loose, take the pins out, hold the plate, and then you can hands pull this bolt out. And when you're done, you spin the bolt back in, get it as tight as you can with your hand, put the plate on, do the final tightening, put the pins back on, and away you go. So now, get this pin in there. So now you've seen how quick it is to take the plate on and off. Let's talk about installing one of these, and we'll start with the bench assembly. Okay, so here we are on the bench, and we got all the parts that come with the kit. There's a bolt, a collar, a half ball, a screw pack, and a plate. So let's go ahead and assemble these. We'll start with the bolt, take the collar, slide it over the bolt. It's milled to fit the cup of the bolt, so put it that way. Take the half ball, place it in the cup. These three are nice and flat. Take the plate, place it over it, and line up the 4 holes in the collar with 4 of these mounting holes. All of these smaller holes are mounting holes. The larger ones are just there for lightening, and they're not for mounting. Out of the screw pack, you want the flathead screws. They look like this. They're flat on the top. The flathead screws are the only ones that will screw into this collar. Screw these in by hand. Get all 4 of them in there. Now I've got all 4 of these screws installed. I haven't tightened them. When I flip it over, you can see that this bolt is still free to move about, and this is what gives you that ability to swivel the plate to follow the contour of your bumper. You can swivel it left to right. You can also swivel it in the vertical plane. Once you take these screws and tighten them, it will lock the bolt down, and you'll no longer be able to move it. It will be frozen in place. So that's the bench assembly of the bracket. Okay, now that you've seen how one of the brackets assembles on a bench, let's actually put it on a real car. The first thing you're going to want to do is remove the toe plug. Now every car is a little different, but most of them you press it in. On some cars you pry it out, and if you do need to pry, it's good to use something plastic. This is a thick plastic card. Don't use metal on your car, or you might ruin the finish of it. So what you do is you want to press around the perimeter of this, and there will be a spot where it gives. In mine it gives down here at the bottom, so I just push that in and it pops out a little bit. Usually there's a keeper. Some cars don't have a keeper. If they have a keeper, just delicately remove the prongs, and there's a little arrow-shaped keeper. The next thing you want to do is take the tow hook that came with your car, your factory tow hook, and screw it in here. And what you're doing is you're chasing the threads. You're making sure that it's all cleaned out. There's no road debris in here. And everything is as expected. So on my car, everything looks great. We've chased the threads. Now we're ready to install the bolt. You start with the bolt, put the collar on it. Make sure you get it that way, and you screw these in together. Now, the tighter you get this collar in here by hand, the easier it's going to be later to do the rest of it. So we'll just screw this as tight as we can into the car. once you've got this collar and bolt in here as far as you can do it by hand, you want to get the half ball, which is right here, and place it in there, and that's what is going to be clamped together. Now we want to take the plate, figure out which position you want to do on the plate. I like it kind of offset. Hinge all of these things together and start installing the flathead screws. The flathead screws are the ones that are flat on top. Okay? We'll just put a couple of these screws in here. So once we've got these screws tight, the next thing we're going to do is use the bracket itself to drive the bolt into the receiver as tight as it will go. The way you do that is you just grab the bracket and just give it a twist until it's nice and tight. Okay? Now the bolt is in tight and you can level set the plate. And the way you level set the plate is you just back out these screws a little bit. Okay? That loosens everything up. And now you can just adjust it until it's just exactly the way you want it. Tighten these screws again, and you don't have to adjust it after this. Now it's installed, and you're ready to put your plate on. Okay. Alright, so now you're ready to put your plate on. And one of the things you'll notice about our brackets is they all have this cut on the outside of them, this bevel. And the reason for that is that if you look at your license plate, you'll see it's been stamped. And so the stamping on your plate matches the cut on this bracket, so it fits real nice and flush. Now the kit comes with a bunch of different screws. It comes with these longer black screws, silver screws of the same length. They're all stainless, and a shorter Phillips head screw, and some washers. And depending on what you're doing as far as mounting your plate, if you're using a surround or something like that, you want to choose an appropriate length screw so that when you attach the plate and screw in the screws, they don't protrude on the back side. That gives you a nice, clean, flush mount. And it also prevents that should anything ever hit this and press it against your bumper, it doesn't drive the screws into your bumper and damage the paint. So that's what's important when you're mounting your license plate. So if your kit includes the quick adapter plate, it's a little bit different install. So let's go back to the bench and put the pieces together. Okay, here we are back at the bench, and we've got the pieces that go into the quick release adapter kit. Now this quick release will work with any kit we've shipped to date, and there are 3 pieces to it. There's the cleat, the shoe, and this screw pack, which has flathead screws, some hair cotter pins, and a wrench. So let's go ahead and get this assembled, and we'll start with this cleat piece. So here's the cleat piece. We're going to take the bolt collar half ball assembly, assemble it just like we did before. This time though, we're going to take this little cleat and put it on there. We're going to take these flathead screws and screw them in. We're going to do all 4 of these. Okay, now we've got all 4 of these screws installed, and we've tightened them with the hex wrench. A couple things to note. One is the bolt is straight relative to the cleat. The other is that we've gone around and made sure the gap at each corner is about the same between the collar and the cleat. And if they're not, you want to loosen and tighten these screws appropriately so you do get that equidistant gap. So with that, this piece is done. We're ready to take this shoe and mount it to the plate. Now here's the plate, and on the plate these smaller holes are the mounting holes. These larger ones are just there for reducing weight, and they aren't used during the installation. A couple things to note about this shoe. We're going to mount it with the open side down, and we're going to mount it so that this milled out portion is against the plate like that. So go ahead and pick the spot on the plate where you want to mount it, and take 4 of these flathead screws again, and we're just going to screw these in, and we're going to use the hex wrench to tighten these up so that they're nice and tight. Okay, now we've got the 4 screws for the shoe installed and tightened, and here's the shoe on the back, and we're ready to just take
the bolt and test fit it in the plate to come together like that. The hair cotter pins go up top, and one of the things you'll notice I'm doing is I'll put them in kind of horizontally like this, and then I'll flip them up. That's just the easiest way to install them. And that's the whole kit bench assembled. We're ready to go put this on the car.
Okay, now we're back from the bench and we've got our bolt with the cleat on it, and we've got our plate with the shoe on it. So let's go ahead and install these. Just get this bolt in here as tight as we can. And now we're going to take the plate to do the final tightening. Now in some instances this plate won't be able to slide right on like this because of the angle of the bumper, and you may have to adjust it. In this case we're good to go. So we'll take the plate, just give it a little twist. That does the final drive of the bolt, and now we're ready to level set the plate. To do that, we just want to back these screws out, to loosen up this collar so that we can move it around. Just a little bit more. Now we can take the plate, slide it back on, and get this just exactly how we want it. So let's see. That looks pretty good, just like that. Now we carefully lift the plate off, take these bolts, do the final tightening on them, put the plate back on. We're ready to install the cotter pins in the back. And now you're ready to mount your license plate. Now in some instances, we've found that the engagement between this plate and the quick release is a little bit sticky. And the reason for that is that as you tighten these fasteners, it very slightly warps this plate. And even warping it by the thickness of a few pieces of paper is enough to go from a smooth engagement to one that's a little stiffer. So that's normal to have that stiffness. And stiff isn't bad, because when it's stiff, the plate doesn't rattle or vibrate any, and it really isn't that much harder to get off. But we do have a trick for how you can adjust this so that you get exactly the level of engagement you want. So let's go back to the bench and I'll show you how we do that.
Okay, so if you find that the engagement between these two pieces, between the shoe and this quick release piece, is too tight for your liking, you can adjust it. And this is how you adjust it. You make a shim out of paper. Just take a piece of paper about this size, fold it in half once, fold it in half a second time. That makes it about 4 pieces of paper thick. Now cut off 2 little strips a little wider than a matchstick. This is what they look like. Okay. Now you take this collar, and I've already done it. I've loosened up these bolts. I've backed them out a little bit. That gets this collar loose, and I can thread these pieces in between the 2 screws on either side of this shoe. Now once you have those in place, flip it over, tighten these screws up, and what you've done is you've put a little bit of a gap between the shoe and the plate. Not much, just 4 pieces of paper thick, but that's enough so that a stiff engagement will usually become nice and smooth. So that's something that you can do if you want to adjust how these 2 pieces fit together.